everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the place where you are connecting from. And welcome to today's talk about the 2024 key insights and the 2025 strategy regarding the securing the software supply chain. Why we did this episode? Because the past year has shown a critical emerging threats, and we have seen a lot of open source software usage in the development pipelines, while we face the increasingly targeted attacks through the dependency hijacking and malware injection, for example. Okay, so incidents like the XZ backdoor remind us about the importance of good best practices and validation of these practices. At the same time, attacks on CI/CD pipelines have reinforced the need for stronger protections across all the build process. Additionally, we have also some changes in the DORA regulation or NIS2 that drive even the alignment future in 2025. In today's sessions, we'll reflect these challenges, and we are going to share strategies that can help you to improve your defenses for the year that we are starting now. Okay, so very important, we'll discuss about the practical tips and experiences from our panelists and our collaborators that I think is going to be very important and going to be very useful for your day-to-day work. Let me introduce our panelists. Hello everybody, and thank you for being here. Okay.
Hi.
We count today with 3 industry experts that for sure are going to bring us a deep knowledge and unique perspectives regarding these topics. First of all, welcome Jonathan Fernandez, that is the head of security for ThoughtWorks Europe, with more than 14 years of experience in defense, healthcare, and trading. Also has invested the last 5 years on incident handling, security awareness, and driving organizational change to embed the security practice in the organizations. Thank you and welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks. Happy to be here today with all of us.
We count also with Jose Rodriguez, that is Managing Director of Codurance in Spain. He's a leader in software development and cybersecurity, and combines more than 18 years of experience also to champion secure, high-quality software supply chains and foster a strong security culture within organizations. So welcome, Jose, and thank you for being here also.
Thank you for having me, and looking forward to the discussion.
And finally, we count also with our CTO, Luis Rodriguez, that is a mathematician and certified CSP security expert with more than 15 years of experience in different areas like software supply chain, static analysis, and other areas. He focused on advanced threat detection, anomaly identification, and practice risk mitigation strategies. Welcome, Luis, and thank you also.
Thank you all, and glad to participate.
So let's start. We have a lot of different topics to review because the last year was a very intensive year regarding the threats and malware and a lot of things. But we have started commenting that the open source was a very important topic because of the huge use of these components that we do in our software component. In fact, more than 90% of the code bases in the industries use open source components. Okay, so a lot of different attacks that take benefit of this approach to introduce dependency hijacking, typo squatting, or even malicious injections in the codes to infiltrate our components. One sample, as we mentioned, is the exit backdoor. Okay, that was something very famous and something that we discuss in the industry. Regarding or from your perspective, for example, I don't know, you can talk in the order you prefer. Please feel free to talk when you prefer, okay, and to complement each other. So the idea is, for example, I don't know, Jonathan, with your specific focus on this part of incident handling. What can you say
Jesus,
regarding this? Yeah,
can you confirm that you are hearing me well?
yeah, I
Yeah.
can hear
Are you
you
hearing me
perfectly.
well?
Yeah. No, no
Yes.
good. Yeah, no noise. It's perfect. Yeah.
Loud and clear.
Sorry, I'm losing you. Sorry, it's the line is
Ah,
cracking. I understand
can
your
you hear me?
questions
Can you hear
about the
me?
Maybe I should rejoin the. I understand that your question was about the what steps to make to improve the security
No,
in
yes.
OSP. So,
Let me check the quality, and maybe Luis or Jonathan, you can go ahead first while we solve the issues with Jonathan
okay.
regarding this specific attack and how this affect to your specific environments. I don't know, Jonathan or Luis. Mhm.
I'm happy to happy to jump in. So open source is basically everywhere nowadays. Now, when you're building software, so it is only common sense, so to speak. No, that if you're looking for a weak link in the chain, no, to plug into, you know, a target, so to speak, you're gonna go for something that is usually less guarded, no, usually less maintained by people who's not their main job, no, who are probably overworked, that kind of thing, right? So from that perspective, it's easy to understand why it becomes a go-to, or why we've seen so much growth, no, when it comes to the number of attacks, in particular some of the ones that you mentioned, no. And I think there is that aspect of it being easy to access to, no, and to go into. But then on the other side, there's also a lack of hygienic practices, so to speak, no. Like if you look at, I don't know, the last time we spoke, we talked about the log4j vulnerability, right?
Mhm.
Like if you look at, I think it was a Sonatype report from this year, there's still like 14% of the deployed versions that are still affected, right? And it's a vulnerability that's very old, actually, right? So when you look at the numbers overall, no, it's a combination of it being easy to access, no, and people not doing their proper diligence, no, to upgrade to the latest versions, etc., which kind of makes it easy, no, for it to have such a wide impact, no. If you look at how to proactively, then you can do no, what is it that you can do in order to reduce that risk, at least on the stuff that you are building. It's just introducing a few quality gates, things like, code analysis, etc., or versioning, right? Like keeping track of when a new version has been released, dependable, this kind of thing will alert you that you need to do something. No? And if you do it, that you're ahead of 80% of the people that don't upgrade their libraries, right? So that's just like one small thing, no, that you could do,
Yeah.
and it definitely doesn't involve a lot, because a lot of these services like GitHub, etc., they already have some of these things in place to let you know. But if you're not listening, or if you're not taking the actions, then it won't matter, right? Are you back, Jonathan?
Yeah, I think I'm back. I'm hearing you magically without doing nothing, basically. I'm now hearing you perfectly well. I totally agree with what you said. I will also add some kind of governance about the related with the components that we are using. We totally want the development teams to be autonomous and to be free to decide what's the best tool to use, basically to solve the problem they are trying to solve. And in my experience, usually they are mature enough to take that decision. At the same time, we don't want to end with 4 different libraries to solve the same problem, because this drastically increases the surface of attack. Finding a good trade-off between the autonomy of the team, but also not having 5 different libraries for the same purpose, I think it's something we need to think about. Maybe involving the teams in the decision, but also having some agreements that sometimes you need to accept that you cannot use your library, the library of your preference, and instead you need to use a different one because it's the standard in the company, inside the company. So that's a trade-off we need to find, and I think that will reduce the amount of issues we can have, and also, of course, having a patch policy that makes mandatory for all of us to update the software, the libraries that we are using when possible. I know that it's not always possible because the chain of dependencies.
Mhm.
But
This
then
is
it's
Sounds easier
happening.
when we talk about that. It sounds easy, but it's not easy. We know it's not easy.
Exactly. But then if it's not happening, right? Like you at least you have it tagged and you know that that's a risk that you're taking or that you're assuming, and then you can put other controls in place, to
Exactly.
mitigate that. Sorry, Luis, go ahead.
Later, I will go back to the remediation of vulnerabilities, but I want to add another factor, which is probably is a bit under the rug, which is the malicious packages. This is something not new. That in the last, I have that data from the last year. We are scanning all the new versions of packages in the open source registries, npm, pipe, and we found we scanned 4.8 million different versions of packages, and we found that 0.19% of the packages were malicious, potentially malicious by our tool. And after manual analysis, we some 13% of them were really malicious, confirmed by the registry. We are talking about a huge number of malicious packages. Most of them, just to keep calm, most of them are typo squatting. They are trying to get typo errors in coding the name of the dependency. But there are a few of them. We call these anchovies because there are many of them. They are all in clusters, in campaigns, but there are a few of them that are targeted, that are directed to specific victims, and those are who make the headlines at the end. So this is another part of the problem with open source security, the malicious packages. And when we talk about, Jesus asked about anomaly detection. Anomaly detection in this case is, can I have any idea if this particular dependency is malicious or not? This version of the common, for example, Spring, there are many eyeballs on it. But in a recondit, in a very specific obscure dependency out there, I don't have so many eyeballs on it. Perhaps there are a single or a couple of developers under that particular version. So it's quite easy for the attackers to hide malware in one of these depth layer dependencies. This is a problem that is we need to do something about that. And anomaly detection is two ways. We can do detect if learn about what is the dependency doing, which files are accessed, which network connections are done by the dependency, and then if there is a difference with new versions, I can detect that anomaly. This is regular machine learning based anomalies, but we also have our approach is a bit different. We try to detect malicious behavior by static analysis, which is our most important technique. But this is another point, the malicious packages.
We have mentioned a lot of different things. Just to recap, Jonathan, a lot of small measures in order to control things. Also, Jose, the idea of doing the things in a similar way across all the organization and these kind of things. And Luis, analyzing a lot of huge amount of components to check the behavior and these kind of things. I think this is not possible without the automation. And in fact, I think that last year, the adoption of automation to integrate static analysis, dynamic analysis, software composition analysis, and putting all together or integrate all these mechanisms and these processes all together, and to be able to process the amount of things that has to review by the teams has been critical, or has been the enabler, let's say. So regarding automation, what's your view here? For example, Luis, depending on this topic of the components, for example, to detect the behavior, the prioritization, the time to remediation, these kind of things. How do you see the automation in this part?
Good question. First, we live in a dependency hell. Okay, even the most precise SCA, SAST, and so on tools have a lot of noise. They tell the right thing, but not the important thing. They tell, obviously they have some false positives, but even with true positives, perhaps there is no risk for that true positive. And with SCA tools, with vulnerability scanning tools, there are many vulnerabilities reported that are not true, because there is no reachable path from how I use the dependency with the actual vulnerability in the third-party dependency. So the problem here is fixing the right thing right, to summarize. And I need context. This context needs a lot of information, a lot of data that is difficult to obtain. For example, perhaps you know about reachability. Reachability is to locate if there is a path, an execution path from my usage of the dependency all along to the call graph, reaching the vulnerable function in a third-party library, which is not perhaps invoked directly. So this is fairly complex and needs to be automated. And this is a part of the context. There are other elements, other information that I can use to reduce the noise, to fix the right thing, the right thing first. For example, exploitability scoring and many other factors I could be considered, but I need to perform an analysis in depth of the how I am using the dependency, which is not easy, but automation is a must for this.
You have mentioned
if
a
I
lot
may,
of things. Go ahead.
if I may now to add to that and get the debate going, no, I would say that yes, you can go to that level of detail, no, but in general, if you already know that there's some sort of vulnerability, maybe exploring alternatives that are not vulnerable, or even upgrading to a different version, etc., where the issue is completely fixed. Because the issue with going that route is, yes, maybe I'm not using it today, but tomorrow someone else thinks, oh, by the way, we had this library already in there. Let's use that feature and then now you're using it, and that's not as easy to once the dependency is in there. No, it's not as easy to know that is happening, right? Like usually you'll find out quite late. No,
thanks, Joseph, for breaking my argument.
No, it's not working. I think there's context where that would definitely, like, maybe you don't have an alternative. Maybe that's the only option you have, and you need to make sure that that's not happening. But in general, no. If you can avoid it, just do, because it helps. No, removing entirely the thing. Yes, you can put on a hazard suit and protect yourself against radiation. No, but if you don't go close to radiation, then you don't get any radiation poisoning. No, you don't have to do anything. So it's a bit like yeah.
It's interesting that I agree with both of you at the same time. So yes, if you can avoid using that, use that. On the same vein, it is also good. What we do, a lot of what we do, it's about prioritization, and it's not the same that you need to stop doing everything just to patch the system, or you can afford talking with the team and say, okay, we have a week to solve this problem. We don't need to be in a rush. We are not using it. Everyone is already aware of the problem. Let's allocate time. Let's do it well. Let's do a research for an alternative instead of just picking the next one in the queue, so we can do our job the best. We can have the best possible outcome. So it just at the same time, it's great to know that we have time enough to react, right?
I would add another advice. Never do a blame fix, such as, for example, a version bump, if the risk of breaking your software is higher than the risk of the vulnerability itself. So this is something so basic that doesn't matter.
No, and I think also another thing that helps, and again, it's I agree, Jonathan. It's a matter of trade-offs, right? Like you have many risks. Like even if you don't, like you could do nothing, and then you wouldn't be achieving your. No? So that's also a risk, no. But in the end, you're doing trade-offs, right? Like how much risk do I want to support in what I'm doing here? No, and one of the things that helps with that, and I think you mentioned it, Jesus, as well, when we were referring to automation, right? And a lot of these practices that should be commonplace, but maybe they're not as much. No, I don't know. Infrastructure as code, your quality gaze, your analysis, static analysis tools, etc., or even things like using trusted repositories, no, for your dependencies, etc. Because a lot of these things, like injections of tools that are not, sometimes there's actually a couple of examples from Google even, no, where they manage basically, because there was a default repository outside of the organization that was calling for a module, a library, etc., that didn't exist. Someone went, created the library, and then everyone who had that default URL to go to a repository just downloaded that version of the library, right? So those things are things that you can put in place already, like your trusted repositories or registries, signing your whatever, your containers, all of this stuff is relatively vanilla stuff that you can do. Yeah. And if you have the tooling available, if you don't know how to do it yourself, or if you have the tooling available to make it easy for you to set these things up, go ahead and do it. It's not going to be that much of a hazard, right? Like, because I think security is seen a little bit like the people who stop things, right? But I feel like that's not a fair assessment. Like, you should always, the same way that people are thinking about quality, they should be thinking about security as well. And the reason why things get stopped is because a lot of the security concerns are brought in after the fact. No, like when you start looking at things that you should have done later on. Well, if you make it seamless so that it's baked into your progress through tools, through certain practices, etc., then you're always thinking about it. It's always being taken care of, and you don't get those delays, or you don't get those blocks, or no. And I feel like that's a big thing, right? Like, most people, the argument against doing stuff like this is going to take longer. No, it doesn't necessarily need to take longer if you're putting the right tooling and the right practices in place. That's the point. No.
After the fact, it's a bad moment to fix anything, but it's a great moment for us for the budget. So
I love that.
like that. It's like that. So what can I say? It's the way that we progress sometimes. I would love not to be like that, but that the history demonstrates that sometime we need a Log4Shell to start caring about patching our systems, for example.
It's all about technical debt. If you try to fix all technical debt you gain along the years, you are done. You never stop. You never end fixing issues. So instead of that, you should start with the most recent ones, which are the easier, because the version gap is smaller, so it's much easier to make the version update without breaking the software. So this is another possibility. Just keep the low hanging fruit first, and then go with the technical debt, but step by step, not get into it, because it's a never-ending story.
You had been talking about vulnerabilities in the application from the log4j and other different. I think it's a vulnerability is something that could be exploited, but it's not an attack. It's like a potential risk. Okay, but the last 2-3 years we have seen like in doubling the malware attacks and the malware appearance in the components and in other areas every year. And the last year, we saw malware not only in the components, but also even attacking the pipelines and the processes to integrate that and to build all the application, let's say. So it's like, and this is a real attack. This is something that is literally, and the intention is actually to damage or to infiltrate the application. In this sense, or regarding the controlling the malware that a lot of times take benefit of these zero-day attacks and these kind of things. How do you see that the teams, the development teams and the integrations teams can protect or can identify, Luis mentioned something before, some kind of early warning mechanisms or dependency firewalling and these kind of things. In case of detecting an infiltration or an attack on this type, how the organization will respond or what are the actions that they should do? They're up to you.
So you mean once you're being attacked, how it should respond, or what are the steps that you can take to prevent it? Which one?
Yeah, first of all, detect that one of your libraries that has been safe for a long time has been attacked.
First prevention, then detection, and then remediation.
So it's like the 3 stages, depending on.
I will say for prevention, I think that any company needs to invest in endpoint prevention, endpoint protection, of course, and also some kind of tooling, because it have a really good return of investment, having good tooling and someone taking care of this tooling. Sometimes we use this automation to reduce the headcount. This is not the way. Automation is to improve the quality, not to reduce the headcount. Okay, if we follow the other path, the dark path, it's not going to end well. But again, for prevention, of course, awareness. And I don't want to mention this thing about doing mandatory trainings yearly. This is somehow mandatory for certifications, some usual for contractual requirements for certifications. Probably someone that has been working with you as a developer for 14 years. I will say that maybe, yes, maybe a mandatory training, again, the same training like the last year, is not going to provide a lot. But just for a cyber insurance, you need that, right? But you can also promote practices, good practices like threat modeling inside your company, which is great and will not only have some preventive outcomes, but also will help you, your team, your development team, to engage with security, right? They're also not preventive, but you need to be prepared for what is for sure going to happen. If you have a success company, you're going to suffer attacks and security incidents. And for that, you need to invest in an incident response plan. If you can afford it, a dedicated incident response team. Not all of the companies can afford that, but at least your people need to know who to call when something happens. This, again, like Jose said before, it's not something that will cost you a lot of money. It's a matter of organization. It's a matter of culture. People in your company need to know who to call. If it's not a dedicated team, at least a specific name with a specific escalation path. And after that, yeah, if your company can afford that, of course, red teaming, cyber insurance, a lot of things can be done to mitigate an attack. I will say disaster recovery plan. And it's not enough to have a disaster recovery plan.
And a playbook. And a playbook, because a lot of the things you can say, oh yes, we have a disaster recovery plan, and it stays too high level, so it's still not useful enough, so that when things happen, because when things happen is not the time to be thinking what to do. You know what I mean? Like what are the steps, what are the things that you should do, and what are the things that you shouldn't do as well? Because you can make it worse. You can make it worse as well, no? So doing that and exercising that type of thing as well regularly is another thing that you should do. Like, what happens if, you know,
I know that
you're
all of you know
ransomware or whatever. Yeah.
One of the steps in every playbook is to isolate affected system and disconnect not essential systems, right? But if you go to whatever company you want and you ask, give me a list of your essential systems, it's not going to happen. Nobody have that kind of list. And after an infection, after an incident, it's too late. And of course, if you create a list, it's going to be not up to date in 2 months. So the only way is automation.
Going back to the question as well, just because I think you were referring particularly to pipelines, right? Like how pipelines, we know
not only.
how
It was more
pipelines
in general. Is the pipeline selection of the components.
I would say there's a few things there, and we've been talking about, like, the thing is, like, there's no silver bullet for this. It's a matter of applying enough of these things until you are feeling good enough with the risk that you're taking, because the risk won't take away. Go away, right? Like you're basically layering security on top of things until you kind of have things under control, right? Like you feel like you have a good safety net to respond and to prevent and so on, right? But some of the things are around segregating, like some companies, for instance, have the same stuff for the build. It's the same people that are building the software and so on and so forth, right? Like, or you give people credentials they don't need to have, or access to things that they don't need to have, and so on. So you're basically making it easier for you. If one of those developers clicks on an email, puts on a thumb drive, whatever, right, to give an attacker access to all of those systems and to really be able to do a lot of damage, right? So compartmentalizing those responsibilities is essential. Doing things like role-based control access, RBAC, and this kind of thing, to ensure that you have different layers of protection that you can audit as well, who's being doing this stuff. Things like when you're running your pipeline, being able to create in a non-alterable way, the logs for what it is that happened, So even if it happens, you can go back and trust and audit, let's say, the process that created that, and kind of do a bit of an analysis there. So a lot of that is, and you mentioned another point I think is quite interesting as well, which is we live in dependency hell, and you mentioned some vulnerability and the noise and all this stuff. I feel like even you can go beyond to the threats themselves, right? Like the vulnerabilities, and staying on top of all of this stuff is difficult, right? Because you have several different lists with different criteria for the ranking. You have lists that are very popular, for instance, that start by classifying things in a lower risk, so people don't pay attention to it, and then reclassify it as a higher risk. Like all this stuff, and staying on top of it is difficult. So when you have a tool or a team, whatever, or the team behind the tool, that is actually paying a lot of attention to that themselves, and they're kind of making sure that they're up to date, that reduces a bit of the resource need that you're going to have as an organization if you want to keep on top of it. You still need to be looking at it, and you still need to be, but it will make it easier for you. And I think that's one of the issues, like having a lot of different sources, a lot of different criteria for this stuff, and not a single point. No, too much information. If you have too much information, you won't pay attention to anything. Basically,
let me because usually we put all the questions at the end of the session, but we have very relevant questions from the audience regarding this point that is Salvador that is asking that okay, new things that are automating the pipelines and the security and everything, that how they can fight or can deal with the big amount of topics that they can detect and this kind of thing. I think is quite related with this topic, the prioritization and this thing that is the problem. So if you can share or recap some
We talked a
recommendations.
bit. We talked a bit about this, about the alert fatigue and how to overcome this. Obviously, I say, for example, don't try to fix all the issues at once because it's impossible. You have to get a prioritization framework just to get to fix the things that really matter, and you need information for that. So you need some tools, some mechanism to get the if that vulnerability is really reachable first. So I will fix those first. Obviously, I cannot forget all the vulnerabilities because as it was mentioned, I will need to fix this technical debt. But first, I need to prioritize, and to prioritize, I need information. I need context, and this context is the key for getting an appropriate vulnerability management system. So this is the point, I think.
What samples of context, Luis, you think that could be interesting according to your experience? You mentioned before the reachability, I think, but I think there are more things, exploitability, if it's in the application or in the testing. Yeah, you can explain a bit more.
Which is the likelihood of being attacked or being exploited a particular vulnerability by the bad guys. There are some models that are trying to learn about on recent attacks and getting that information updated, so each vulnerability can be scored. There is a scoring system, and you can get that information as part of the context. And you also need to fix the things that are internet exposed because they are obviously more accessible to the bad guys. So there are different pieces that I need to take into account. And there is a concept in ASPM systems, which is the idea that tries to automate that kind of prioritization and context-based vulnerability management. They try to get all the information and produce a funnel that gets filtering the different issues until it reach the point where I need to fix the most urgent ones. This is the way that it's used for reducing this alert fatigue and getting the best with the available resources.
I will add that most of the times the default configuration is not what you need. A lot of companies invest some money in some budget in a tool, and they expect the.
No, I'm not talking I'm not talking of tools. Tools is a.
Oh, you mean from a.
There are three things: people, process, and technology. Technology is nice, but you need the process. You need to which vulnerabilities are really matter.
Triage. Basically, he's talking about triage. Basically, he's saying, okay, out of all these things, we need to fix them, but what is the highest priority? No, who's dying? No, who is stable and who can wait for a very long time? No, the same thing as.
And the people factor. Who is going to fix and which is that people trained on fixing that kind of vulnerability? Not all vulnerabilities are the same. You have a code vulnerability, probably the developer is the key person, but he has to know how to fix it and be helped with that process. So
I think one thing you should okay, so the question had like, okay, so we get overwhelmed with all these alarms. Is there any way that we can prevent it from happening? I know about things you shouldn't do. One is publish everything, because that's only going to make the problem worse, and people will just not pay attention to it. And then I don't know what's worse. No, it's like it's gonna happen, and then you didn't pay attention. So I would say that you can, however, pick the things that you want to see that are higher risk or whatever, right? Enable those first. And then slowly you can start opening up the information faucet, so to speak. No, instead of trying to I plug the tool or whatever, and I'm getting alerts all the time, no, from through email, through Slack, through page, or whatever, right? So instead of doing that, just focus on the things that, kind of like a triage on what kind of information you want to see first. I know you were talking about vulnerabilities themselves, and for this, as I mentioned before, there's a few lists, and the lists themselves have certain priority ranking for the vulnerabilities, right? So you can choose, for instance, to only look at 7 or higher, something along those lines, right? Because those are potentially the ones that can affect you the most, no? But that's kind of the idea. Don't just open everything and we will see it, because that's not gonna help. But start with the priority of the information that you want to see, and slowly add on top of that in a meaningful way. Yeah, in a meaningful way. Try to find ways to make it relevant, contextualize, or even have it go to different responsibilities or different areas of responsibility, so to speak, so that it doesn't all go to the security team, or it doesn't go all to the to one person that is the one who set up the system or whatever, right? So those things, I think, can help in that sense, but don't turn it off and don't turn it on completely.
Yeah, I think rather making some metrics transparent for the team, and let them also evaluate how much effort they can dedicate to fix technical debt. In this case, security technical debt, it's important. I have seen some degree of success when companies decide to gamify fixing some of the security issues. It sounds like we are making it trivial, like not giving it, but the point is that it works. Most of the times it works. There is no silver bullet. I will never say that. I agree with Jose that it's not silver bullet for anything security, but I have seen good results, good outcomes of gamifying the process of fixing security. Well, I will not say vulnerabilities, but security issues.
Good point. I think even in DORA, also there are some metrics just to monitor the time to fix, the time to remediation, the time to detect. So related with this thing, with this topic, I think probably you are using. I mentioned in DORA because it was the regulation of the 2024. We have only 1 month to put in place, so I think we are not going to be able to give any last moment advice. But the next year is the NIS2. I don't know.
But DORA is, now that we're talking about regulations and stuff, is like, I think that's a way for the European Union to try and force accountability on people, because it's kind of like, okay, you're doing whatever you want, at least do this minimum. And again, regulations are the same, like with ISO and so on. Their guidelines, their checks, and it's very lax on how you end up implementing this stuff, right? But I think just going through it, understanding what are the risks, is already better than not even thinking about it. Or so that's,
DORA is
for me, it's a good step.
No,
exactly.
If I remember well,
come on.
one of the points is you need to have a backup strategy and recovery policies. And it's like, are you developing software without that already? Maybe you should stop and you have that, right? It's also a lot about risk management. As any legislation, sometimes it requires some effort from the IT people to go through it. It's not easy to read sometimes. But if you take the time, DORA is not asking for a lot.
No.
Yeah. I will adjust.
Sorry. No, go ahead, please.
I just mentioned one point that is for me the most difficult. Is the you have to know which is the security posture, the risk management posture for third parties. So if you cannot have your own ideas on security posture of your own assets, how can I get that information for a third party which I don't have any control? I think that at the end, I will be asking for the providers or for my providers about SOC 2 or ISO 27001 certifications as a way to make some sort of assurance about how well or bad they are taking security. But obviously, the certifications measure if you have a control, not if you are doing the control well. So I think, for example, the Snowflake incident the last year, which affected, for example, some banks and huge companies. The problem was that some third parties were not taking care of the endpoint, and some installed malware which exfiltrated credentials, and the Snowflake credentials were used by bad guys to exfiltrate information for databases from the customers of those third-party affected organizations. So how can I get the assurance that the third party is getting real security on the endpoint? The developers using my assets are getting on. This is I think the main problem with DORA and with NIS2 also.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at the supply chain, again, as I said before, is the weakest link, and that's something that is coming up more and more and more, because going straight to the target that you want to attack is getting tougher, right? Like people do have time to and money to invest, right? So it's easier to go to someone that is lower in that chain, no, and go through there. And we just had the leak from Hacienda, no, which originally was kind of like, oh, they got hacked. No, they didn't get hacked. A provider got hacked, no? But that's the thing, they already had the data. So basically it's a bit, you're extending the trust to the people that you're working with, and you're assuming that they're gonna, but you wanna trust them, and you want to verify as well, right? And I think that's one of the things that if we're going into trends, no, for the future, I think handling the data from all of this stuff, especially for large organizations, is going to be one of the things that people will be reviewing. Yeah, like you need somehow across a group of companies, yeah, to be able to gather, match, and make sense of that amount of data in order to inform your strategy and your policies, or even if you go and talk to people, even if you have to go and talk to people for them to improve the policy, or them to tighten up, no, like doing it after the fact, or once a year when you have your audit or whatever, no, that's not gonna be enough. You want that to be as close as possible and as fresh information as possible. And right now, I don't think that I know of. Maybe you guys know something else, no? But I don't see anything that currently has that level of
the regulation needs to evolve in that way to be more clear about how I can get the assurance of the security of the third parties, because there is no standard. I think that we will see evolution.
There are things that I feel are easier to like with the software bill of materials and this kind of thing. Like there were already some initiatives to kind of create a graph and like this kind of stuff, right? But that's I think part of the easy part of that, because there's a lot of security that is not really about the software; it's about the practices that people are putting in place in order to prevent stuff from happening, right? Like, doesn't matter how secure your pipeline is or whatever, if someone has their password written on a post-it note in the monitor, you know what I mean? It is what it is. So this is why Jonathan was saying, like, well, I don't want to give you the same old thing of you need to train your people, but yes, you do need to train your people. They need to be aware, and they need to their spider sense needs to be going off, when things that are not right. Yeah, and
Training
I
the
think that
spider sense.
already.
I love that. I love that. I will save that that sentence for myself. Totally, totally. Talking about vendors, a pattern that I see in many companies, and should not be like that, of course, is that there is a strict process for doing a vendor review and then never again. So you start working with a vendor and you never again review the security posture of the vendor. So it's just a gate you need to go through to work with me. And after that, maybe the people is not the same. The company has been sold to another big company or acquired or merged or whatever, or you grow as a company and now your requirements are more strict than 3 years ago and you need to ask for more. But this vendor has been with you for the last 10 years and you never review their security posture. This is something we cannot afford as an industry.
For cloud providers, there are some attempts to get more details on how mainly for data protection. I think that's a way to go for that particular niche, but I don't know how to do that for the whole problem, the third party problem.
Jose introduce the trends for next year because we have like 10 minutes, 15 probably, just to talk a bit about the trends next year. A lot of trends, but probably the most what we about are the artificial intelligence, the large language models, and these new capabilities for defense, for attacks, or new attacks based on artificial intelligence, new tools, new
For attacks, for
measures.
sure.
What's your view on all these
Attack
things regarding attacks and defense?
Well,
And
I think two are that come to mind that are next 2-3 years. You can count on that. One is used for attack, and this is massive phishing campaigns and this kind of thing. Like every crime syndicate that has some money to invest is probably going to invest on that. Yeah, it's not only a corporate world kind of buzzword. Yeah, and I think that's one. So you're going to be seeing a lot of that, and very well made. And there's some attempts now. I saw some news the other day, like Nist and company in the US they're trying to. They have the AI challenge or AI detection challenge or whatever, right? Like this basically, how do we know if this is real or not, or it was written by that kind of thing? So, because the thing is, at the beginning, it was relatively easy, but now, and especially if you're able to not custom train, but what's it called? Fine tune. No, if you're able to fine tune and so on, it can really give you results that are very good, very very good. Not that easy to detect that they're not correct. So the times of I am the prince of whatever and mistakes and that kind of thing, that's in the past. Like it's gonna be really easy to get a decent phishing campaign going on and so on and so forth, right? So that's one trend for sure. And the other one is the one that I told you about, data. I feel like the bigger the organization, the more this becomes, as you're trying to ensure this, and Jonathan was saying, like we do it at the beginning, great, and we do it after the incident. Then I'm required to audit you and see, well, what happened, what went wrong, and so on. But the reality is, you want that visibility all the time, and you want to be able to plug into those systems and offer that as a. And I feel like that's another. There's a lot of fragmentation on the information, whether it is on the threats or it is on how things are being implemented and so on. And that's big for me. It's going to be a big thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, Luis.
Yeah, for me, I see an increase of attacks to talent acquisition, human resources, finance department, operations. I will say operations using also Gen AI. We are aware of some attempts of passing an interview for a developer, as a developer, directly using a real-time fake generated video and also voice in real time, right? This at the moment is pretty obvious. It will not be obvious, I will say, in 2 years, but who knows, maybe in 1 year, right? I would also recommend an article from KnowBe4. KnowBe4 are really well respected phishing campaign organizer, phishing simulation campaigns in the industry. They have an article about how a North Korean fake IT worker tried to infiltrate the company. And it's really interesting article. The combination of these geopolitical things with artificial intelligence is not far away. It's not science fiction. It's going to happen. So my recommendation for the next year is to don't forget your operation department, please.
Face-to-face meetings is the the way to go.
Face-to-face.
I have seen some in the RSA conference this year. There was a topic on this, on AI usage by the bad guys, and I have, in fact, I asked all the CISOs, all the specialists I meet, I asked the same question. Do you think that AI will be used by the bad guys in productive ways for designing and for creating novel attacks and for making attacks much powerful? And they say yes, in unison. The problem is that I say, do you know any case, a real case where AI was used for designing a real attack? And they say, oh, I don't know, perhaps it's difficult to. I know that there were usage of AI for getting better information on the victims, for example, for phishing attacks. This is an actual use of AI tools for getting that. And they use normal chatbots. They are not, perhaps the case you gave is a special one, I don't know. But yet there are no attempts to use AI for getting designing new attacks, which is the next step, I think. But
depends on what you mean by designing new attacks. Yeah, because there are already some examples of exploits being created by AI. Yeah, I'm guessing something more complicated is what you mean, no?
Yeah, the same as automatic code generation, but it's not new. Basically, it's something that automates part of the generation of this exploit code. That is automatic. Could be automated with the AI.
No, but talking about AI, using it for counter, like who is it that is it O2 that is using the granny to help scammers to waste scammers time and this and that. So that's it's like you would call a honeypot or whatever, right? Like I want to see how it's working, what are the things that they're doing in order to learn and to prevent, etc. And that's a good way as well. No, it can be used both ways, right? Like that's the beauty of it, no? And finding new ways. I think another novel kind of approach to this is the Morris 2. Morris 2 is Morris is the first worm, to self-replicating virus. No, there's actually now Morris 2, which it's still a lab kind of experiment, but it can replicate through the prompts, basically. So the experiment was you have a RAG architecture, so a retrieval augmented generation architecture, which is very common now with LLMs. Like everyone is trying to. For those who don't know, a RAG architecture is more like when you have these things where you ask, tell me, I don't know, what's the holidays policy for my company, and then that thing goes, and gives you back a summary of what the policy is, maybe a link to go and check it in Confluence, that kind of thing, right? So those things are built more or less the same way, and it's already commoditized. Lots of cloud vendors have that. So the experiment was basically, if you have a bunch of applications that have that same structure, can we create something that can replicate through them? And yes, at least theoretically in the lab, it has been possible, and it's been possible through image and through text as well. And it managed to exfiltrate as well information from the applications themselves. Yeah, so things like emails, email addresses, of that were in the applications and so on. So again, it's not it's not as far. It is changing a lot of the landscape. How long until it becomes if it's working well, it will take a very long time to notice, or to know.
Very good. Thank you very much. I think we have running out of time, so probably let's switch to the final part. I don't know, your closing actionable tips for the audience, just to summarize what you think is more important regarding seeing the activity in this year, and what they should be the focus on next year, improving the open source security, improve the prioritization, put in place processes, automate in some way. Your tips for the working day of the attendance. Who wants to be the first one to say?
Okay, I'll go first. I think if you don't have a lot of resources, go back to the basics. Do a lot of the hygienic stuff. It's not going to cost you, and it will already get you ahead of 80% of companies out there. Like update your dependencies, etc., etc. I know it sounds very basic, but it's amazing how many people are not doing that, and that is a big risk. Yeah. And then investing in your people so that they are more security aware, right? Like things like passwords, or not clicking on SMS messages that say that their package has been delayed in customs or whatever, that kind of phishing attack. A lot of the attacks for these things are because employees of the company gave them access through that kind of thing. They don't target they don't target the visa, right? Like they target people who are close or can and then you escalate from that, right? Like that's the whole point. You get in, and then you try to because a lot of the times you put more effort into the outside stuff and not so much on the inside. So once they're in, it's kind of easier to even there's another article. There's actually two recent from the Red Team at CISA, where they one of the things or the insights that they were sharing is how while they were doing that, they went in through a provider, and they were not only able to gain access, but they were also able to move laterally into other providers. So it's you need to pay attention to it, and I think the human factor is usually the weakest factor. So invest on that at least, and then you can get all the tooling and all the other stuff.
Thank you very much, Jose.
I will let Jonathan to end the closing thoughts.
Okay.
So I think that there are many independent sources working on software and cloud security. For example, the WASP project, well known, the OpenSSF, the CNCF, Science Institute, professional associations. For example, we worked recently with the ISC2 Spanish chapter, which they are active on cybersecurity now. And they could give much better advice than mine. For one generic advice, I take the same idea as Jose. For example, cybersecurity hygiene. Baby steps. Start with the easy things. First, for example, I mentioned the inventory. Do I know the assets that I need to protect? For example, in the software infrastructure. Do I know all my providers? Which are my providers? This is part of the inventory. Also, things as mundane as secret leaks protection, because most of the attacks come from a leak secret, many cases. So, which is my strategy for preventing secret leaks? This is something so easy and so complex to do well that. And obviously, there are many things that we mentioned. For example, instead of focusing on this whole security technical depth, start with blocking the addition of new security problems to get more to start working, to start moving. Because if I learn that, then the resolving periodically the issues coming from technical debt will be much more efficient. So I think that it could be a starting point from my side. Then you can go to more complex things, like, for example, vulnerability prioritization that we mentioned. We can go with build security and so on and so forth, but start with the easier parts.
Thank you very much. Jonathan, to close.
Okay, I will say that I would recommend to let development teams breathe a little bit. If you are always putting your developers under pressures to delivery with tight deadlines, security is the most obvious shortcut they will take. These people that you hire because they are really, really smart, let them breathe, let them do their work with the maximum quality possible, and they will do it. They are really smart people, and you just need to support them, train them, give them the proper toolings, and they will surprise you not only with the quality of the development, but also the quality of the security of what they are developing and delivering.
Very, very right. I agree with all of you. Thank you very much. Thank you
Thanks.
very much, Jonathan, Jose, Luis, for sharing these valuable insights and these advices for the day-to-day work. I think we have covered a lot of different things, and we have tackling the open source risk, security in the pipelines, preparing a bit about the regulations and the artificial intelligence. So I think also that for everyone attending the session, I hope you have been working away with actionable strategies that you can apply next year in your day-to-day work and improve your software supply chain security as we have been looking today. So from my part, I think we have answered the questions that we have detected, and the one where we put here and the other regarding how to count with the huge amount of software supply chains, how to protect the pipelines, something about the salsa, that is something also that Jose mentioned before regarding the environments and this kind of thing. So from my part, nothing else. Thank you very much to everybody, and stay tuned for the next session of the Talk series that we have every month. And see you next month in January. Merry Christmas, enjoy the holidays, stay secure, stay innovative, and see you. Thank you very much, and see you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
It was a pleasure.